for this open conversation about diversity in small business. I'm Polly Humphries. I'm the content specialist at Clic. Donna is there to me, but I don't know where she is to you, but wave Donna. She's our co-founder and CCO. And we're also joined today by Kevin Smith, who's a highly experienced video and content creator with a passion for storytelling. We've got Alia Weigel-Robertson. She's up there to me. Hi, Alia. Co-founder of HR consultancy for the creative industries, Journey HR. We've got Yanis Yanu, who has a wealth of experience in arts, marketing, PR, branding and audience development. And we have Marvin Simon. Hi, Marvin, who's recently graduated with a bachelor's degree in management and marketing. So good for you.
Thanks.
As we discussed before, we're all aware that the topic of diversity is huge. It would be impossible for us to touch on everything from race and gender, sexual orientation, religion, the list goes on. So what we're hoping to achieve by way of this conversation is just to at least help light a spark amongst other small business owners, employees and employers, so that they might start talking within their own businesses about diversity. So with that in mind, I'd just like to ask you all what your definition is of diversity in the workplace and how has this personal thinking changed over time? Who would like to go first?
Go on.
Alia.
Okay, no pressure. So for me personally, diversity is integral and a real part of fabric in terms of how we live our lives at work and how we live our lives at home. Diversity is about difference and celebrating difference and recognizing the power of difference. So yeah, that is, I guess, what I understand around diversity.
Okay, and how for you do you feel, has that developed over time? Have you always had a solid understanding? How have you built that up?
So I guess I've been very lucky. My upbringing, my father was a human rights lawyer and played a huge part as a role model for me around celebrating diversity. He was the legal director at the Commission for Racial Equality back in the day, and played a strong part in bringing in the Religious Discrimination Act. So he was a real champion for me. So yeah, love my dad. He worked really hard on it. Also coming from the angle as a female Asian, diversity has been really important growing up as a family where both my parents were first generation immigrants. That sense of you're different. I grew up in Winchester, down south, where ethnic diversity was -5 when I grew up. So being the only brown girl in my class and kind of visually noticing that difference has played a big part in, I guess, who I am and how I approach things and what I value. So yeah, I could go on about it forever, but I appreciate everybody has a story to tell.
Thank you. How about you, Kevin? What's your take on this?
For me, diversity is all about embracing the unknown. When we start to realize that there are people or cultures that were not ubiquitous or kind of intrinsic to the areas where we were brought up or the communities where where we grew up, then when we look to understand the differences and we nurture the curiosity and embrace it with the intention or the vision of seeking a commonality or learning the language that's intrinsic to someone that we don't have that familiarity with, and we embrace it, and then we incorporate their language or their approach in a way that it's no different than learning French, learning a regional dialect to understand what slang means somewhere, and then recognizing that as valid and creating an environment where we welcome and embrace and integrate those differing approaches in a way that doesn't ask someone else to taper their being to fit within our box or our paradigm.
Yeah.
So that's what diversity is for me. It's all about learning someone else's language, their ways, and then making it part of the overarching culture. That and to include them without judgment.
Thank you. And how about you then, in terms of how that's developed and changed? What's informed your understanding most?
What's informed my understanding? Okay, so I was one of those kids who I grew up in Arkansas. And, it's not ironic or anything, but Arkansas is it's a hugely segregated state, in the deep South. And I was fortunate when I was 9 years old. I was put into accelerated programs, which gave me an opportunity to, kind of engage in a more intensive, foundation of education. But what I found was that I was usually the only person of color in my classes. And so my upbringing was such that it became normal for me to understand other people's, it's normal, to speak their language.
Yeah.
And then in learning to speak their language, but not necessarily having mine to be considered either valid or anything more than novel. And so even as I've continued, in professional spheres, that's more or less tends to be the case, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Well, it comes. I think it is Aliyah. Is it Aliyah? How do I pronounce it? Did I pronounce it right?
This chat,
Aliyah.
Aliyah. Yeah, it's kind of what she said about her dad. That's what it comes down to. My experiences is that you can always tell when someone was raised well. You always attribute it to the parents, who brought their kids up within understanding that people are people, and seek the goodness and understand values, and then you kind of fill in the blanks with the nuances or how people express them. But you can always tell, when someone was raised well, and it starts with the parents.
Yeah, thank you. Giannis, do you have anything to add on this? What would you say is your definition of diversity?
I don't know. Personally, as a gay man, as I usually say these days, a gay European man, because I feel like that's becoming a bit of a diverse background in its sense. I was working in the arts. I was always surrounded by people from diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
So I was always. For me, it was my ecology, it was my community. It was my norm. In a way. So I never thought as necessarily part of a minority group, but always through what I sought to do and how in order to make arts as inclusive and as accessible as possible. I became aware from an early age that there are barriers and there are problematic areas there that enable people to reach kind of diverse backgrounds. So although it's I don't know, I've just lost my thought there, but it kind of I always functioned within a bubble. Okay. And sometimes that bubble it made me realize that outside of the bubble things were not as kind of rosy and as diverse as I thought.
Okay. So is that what you're thinking, the way that your feelings have developed and changed over time then, is how you sought to perceive life outside of that bubble then? Because you were relatively...
Yes, okay. Exactly. I operated within kind of this environment, and suddenly kind of, with loads of factors brought to my attention the fact that things are not as rosy as they are, and there's still lots of fights that have to be won across the board. Gay rights, disability rights, Black Lives Matters, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, thank you. And Marvin, coming over to you then, what's your experience? Because we're talking about diversity in the workplace specifically here in this question, but you've just finished uni. So can you relate it to that or both?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that diversity is very prominent within university. I feel as though that in itself is it's a good you could almost say unique selling point for universities to embrace that kind of diversity and
Yeah.
wanting to accept people from different cultures. So I'd say it's definitely prominent within university, and I'd say for me the understanding of diversity, if we're talking about it within the workplace,
Yeah.
I like to look at it from more of the realm of like the resources or the opportunity to grow. When we think about employees within the workplace, diversity must kind of allow everyone, regardless of the culture you're coming from, etc., etc., giving everyone an equal opportunity to grow within that role, and not just essentially just giving them a job to boost up statistics or numbers, but putting them in positions to be able to make key decisions or manage or influence, inspire. And I guess my understanding of diversity came from just my own cultural background. So my mother is actually from Uganda in Africa, but my father is from Antigua in the Caribbean. So I've always kind of had to embrace my cultural. It's a bit weird because there are two different cultures that I always struggle to embrace constantly. I wouldn't say I'm more than either or, but it's just because I've been brought up in such a diverse home background, if you want to call it that. I feel like innately I've just always had the ability to embrace that and appreciate it when I meet other people from different cultures and backgrounds as well. So
bit like Giannis then, your bubble's all mixed and diverse anyway, so you kind of had that security within that to look outside. Cool, thank you. Unless anyone else has got anything to add on that point, it'd be interesting to hear your takes on what it means for a business to have commitment to diversity and why that is so important.
I just think I'll just kind of pop in because I was actually inspired by Kevin to start this conversation because of his content that I saw on LinkedIn. Because kind of when everything blew up in America and it was everywhere on the news and everything started, of course, Kevin touched on it. And it was really interesting hearing his perspective being an American and having experienced, diversity issues there compared to here. And I mean, I'm a white, straight woman. I'm as like non-diverse as you could get myself, personally. I've grown up in very diverse places, and then moving to England 13 years ago, it was like night and day. I live in Kent, where there is no diversity. I think the last census that it's like 98.9% white. And so what Kevin kind of sparked this thing in me as a business, because not intentionally, but being in Kent, we have an all white, straight, female staff. And it's because everyone that's applied has been white people. I mean, so my main question is, it's kind of a tough question, is how do we, especially as small business owners, make sure that we're not part of this problem and make sure that we can create a diverse company when the options are, it's slim pickings out there for us. What can we do is my question.
What is that commitment of diversity, and how can that manifest itself? How do we go about that? Go for it.
So I hear you. I understand that over the past kind of few months, I think more businesses, small businesses, large businesses, have been really reflective of their diverse makeup or lack of it. And it is a challenge, but it's a good question for all of us to be asking. I think obviously during the pandemic, we really had to think about, all of us have had to think about our relationship with work and where we work, and most of us have ended up working from home. And I think as small business owners, I think that this is a really good opportunity for all of us to expand where we are hiring from. So if we don't necessarily have to hire people who are working within our regional space. We have proven to ourselves that we can work effectively and productively in many different locations, and we're seeing awesome examples of really big organisations like Siemens, I think, who have just come out only recently to say that they have created a policy where people can work anywhere. which is incredible.
Yeah.
We might not have the technology to support that, so I appreciate each small business may have its challenges, but ultimately, if we can then broaden that pool, I think then hopefully we will see more diverse talent coming through. And I think the question is, why aren't we seeing it?
Yeah.
What is our recruitment strategy been? Where have we been advertising our roles? I often see so many small businesses who work on a referral scheme. Does anyone know anybody? And it's often a friend of a friend of a friend, which then really limits who you're hiring, because you're hiring exactly the same people, which limits that diverse talent coming through. So I've seen organisations, small businesses really flip that referral scheme. So it's more around, okay, who aren't we seeing?
Yeah.
And how
do you have
can
any
we attract that talent?
Do you have
I
any
think
kind
that's also opened up a significant point about, women and working mothers and working fathers and single parents. And it makes us look further outside of this diversity umbrella to embrace far more, because I know a lot more people that I know that have been at home with their children, have been working more throughout the pandemic because they had greater chances. So that's quite interesting.
I was going to say, go on, Yanis, sorry.
No, I just wanted to go a step further from Lion. Apart from integrating and offering remote and flexible kinds of working, we can be offering part-time opportunities as well. There are apparently 2 million women from diverse backgrounds in this country alone that are inactive with caring commitments. And apparently 87% of them want to go back to work, but for the vast majority of them, the caring commitments is a barrier. So I need kind of part-time working and flexible types of working is very crucial in unleashing that potential when it comes to women, people with disabilities, people that caring for other people. But if you don't mind me saying another small point, before we even go to that point, I think businesses and business leaders should start exploring and kind of thinking carefully, and possibly the pandemic gave them that opportunity about what are we have them, I have them, what are unconscious biases out there that stop us, in embracing a much more diverse background? What are those things that kind of, hinder us from kind of, taking the opportunity and the risk to kind of, bring something different, somebody different in our team? And that's very, very difficult to achieve. And it's a journey in its own, but I think it's very, very crucial and very important if we really, really want to change the culture of our small business.
Yeah, definitely. I think, like you said, really what it comes down to is starting a conversation. So opening a conversation, business owners, if there's partnerships or anything, just talking about that. I don't know, I wish I had more information on it, but I know they did a study in America where they studied the hire rates for people based on their names. Has anyone heard of this? So overwhelmingly, like white-owned companies would hire white-sounding names, and totally
led to people putting different names on their applications, hasn't it, to get their foot in the door, and that's ludicrous.
Yeah. It's insane. I think there's a stat around. I think it's 60% of hiring decisions are made purely based on name, on age, on sex, and on education. Those are the defining things. 60%, guys. That's the stats we're looking at.
So we kind of want to talk about, practical things that us small business owners can do to again, not be part of this problem. And that's definitely one of them, is to maybe even cover people's names up when you look at CVs. Have someone else do it for you when you're getting them through, so that you don't, whatever is going on in your brain, you don't automatically look at anything like that.
I think it's easy to say what we should do in this kind of altruistic, like from an altruistic perspective. But prejudices abound, and they're deeply ingrained, and it's very, very difficult to look inside of yourself and to start breaking down, because a lot of it's a construct on our ego and our sense of self-worth. And it goes much deeper than this, just like, recognize each other as equals. Like, no, it's really, really deeply ingrained into our psyche. But one thing that for me is tangible and actionable is when we consider that diverse perspectives allow us to reach new markets. And so if we look where we have holes in our business, we see, okay, this is how much revenue we're generating. This is potential revenue where we're not, making a connection with this demographic. Then to bridge that gap, then if we have someone who speaks that language or who can in some way help us to reflect the ideals and the values of that group, then that is going to be a positive in terms of our bottom line. And so if we actually simply look at where there are opportunities to increase our revenue and what people, what personas will be able to communicate that message more precisely, succinctly, or with more of a sense of trust, then that is something that's a bit of a precursor to this idea that we can look inside of ourselves, become better people, and not, have the prejudices that are associated with that. They're in everyone. They're in all of us. It's part of our society. It's part of capitalism, and it's a big ask. But we can, look to increase revenue. We can see that there's potential in other markets that we're not tapped into, and some people will help us to bridge those gaps.
I agree with Kevin, and Kevin, I 100%. I think we all recognise that there are prejudices. We are humans. We are all going to have biases. Whether you're from an ethnic minority or you're white, we all have biases. Whether you're disabled or not, we all have biases. So I think a huge piece of what small businesses and what we're encouraging people to do is to try and understand where those biases are coming from. So educate yourself. So in the industry that I work in the creative industry, and I have had friends call me and really were quite unaware of the whitewash that they described it as a whitewash in their organizations. And they kind of suddenly, after the Black Lives Movement came into more prominence, deeply saddening reasons, but important reasons to be discussed, that their eyes had almost kind of been opened to the fact that this was where they were very unaware of the system that they were in. And I think we, as small businesses, as leaders, we need to start encouraging people to educate themselves more so they can feel comfortable to have discussions, feel comfortable to understand their biases, feel comfortable to really start to pay attention to the millions of reports that McKinsey's put out around the value of diversity. I mean, my goodness, McKinsey as an organization every year, percentages, from kind of 15% of businesses who are gender diverse perform better to 35% if you've got an ethnic diverse group of people will perform better in an organization. So it is, the stats are there. They've been there for decades telling us diversity is good. And I don't know what we've been doing. I don't know whether it's this, whether it's the fear of change, whether it's the lack of understanding, the true understanding of our biases that stops us from doing this.
Sometimes I feel like people are happier when, again, it goes back to ego, and people will be happy with smaller returns if they're not made to feel uncomfortable or like they are not like super important or rank in hierarchy. I've been in industries or situations where I've definitely felt like it wasn't important to have the optimal solution. It was important to have my solution. And it comes down to, kind of ego. So, I don't know what the answer is to that, but it's something that I've perceived in my professional experiences.
So are we all sort of thinking then that really it's about ripping the plaster off then? Have all businesses got to show a commitment to diversity? Is it about training? Is it about hosting open discussions? Is it about forcing people, for want of a better word, into conversations that they wouldn't ordinarily have? How would that manifest itself?
Practically.
It's a really good question. I think over the last few months, with everybody having to work very differently and us all finding ourselves in quite unusual and trying situations, there has been more appetite, I think, because we're working remotely, to communicate and to feel perhaps a little bit more confidence in how we're communicating, because we can exit, we can hit leave the meeting if it all goes terribly wrong, and we can blame it on a tech default, right? Not that I've ever done that before. But ultimately, I think the stuff that's been going on in the world has encouraged us to have conversations. It's encouraged people to feel safer to call stuff out. We've seen people gaslighting businesses, reporting on the trauma that they've had to endure and face within organizations. And that's a good thing, but it's also a scary thing if you're running a business and you feel that you're just, you feel like you're doing a good job.
Yeah, but you're not quite sure how to push it further.
Yeah.
Without offence, this is what I'm thinking. How does it all? It's very interesting. Marvin, I just wanted to ask you quickly, if I may. You're actively looking for work at the moment?
Yeah, I am. Well, yeah, I am currently. Yeah.
So, have you, in situations now where perhaps you've had interviews or conversations with people that may lead to a job, has the conversation of diversity been raised?
Well, in this current moment of time, like in this current period that we're in, I've not conducted enough interviews to that degree to actually know, but I can speak about previous experiences, and I'd say I'd say something that we've all kind of touched on is which I found quite interesting, that we all kind of had a mutual understanding on, was the when we spoke about prejudice and the whole the kind of you could almost say systematic disadvantages, because there have been cases where I've been invited into interviews, and my name as a whole, Marvin Simon, is it's a pretty straightforward name. It's a common name, if you want to call it that. And there's been cases where I've made it to the interview, and they've said that they've liked my they've liked my CV, they've liked the way I've articulated myself, but for one reason or another, I've not gotten a job, and there's not been no immediate understanding of what it was that I did wrong, or where it was that I could have done better. But it was just more so we found another candidate that is much more ideal for the position, which has happened numerous times. And it would be different if I had a clear understanding and it was feedback provided on what I could do to do better. But there's never been that incident. So I feel when we're speaking about diversity, as we've said, it's internal as well as external. Who you actually allow into, who you allow into bring into your organization? Is it based on these characteristics that we've mentioned? But also when you have employed these individuals, as we've said, there are unfortunately the way people think is a result of ingrained, like we said, constructs and understandings, and an unwillingness to relearn maybe things that they've learned that are not really applicable in today's society. But when you're also employing these people into your organizations, are you putting them in positions that allow others to be educated and a different point of view and perspective to be introduced within a culture that potentially allows other members of the organization to see things from a wider perspective and a wider light. So I don't know if that's answered your question as well as you would have liked, but but yeah, that's just
totally. I just really was interested in your take on it from a job searching point of view, because you're right in the thick of it, while everyone's trying to avoid being in an echo chamber. Everyone's trying to make changes. Everyone's, hopefully, employers are trying to look at their diversity within their business. And I just wondered how it affected you already. So it is a good take on it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I do believe, that. Kevin, was you saying something, or?
No, you go ahead, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, one thing I will say, just to finish off, I feel as though with the recent turn of events, as Ionis, mentioned the Black Lives Matter and all of these recent events going on, I feel as though companies will feel encouraged to really consider their who they are employing, and recognizing differences and almost embracing it. Whether or not it actually occurs is a whole other debate in itself. But I feel as though these turn of events will encourage companies to look into that further.
Yeah, thanks, Marvin.
Yeah,
What
I
were you
have
going to
a little.
say, Kevin?
Well, just that if you spend time on LinkedIn and you see some of the companies who announce, like, yeah, we're proud to say that, we're expanding, or, like we've survived through, through the pandemic, and you see the company photos, and just one thing I noticed is it's just rarely like diverse, it's
when you
and
said that, Kevin,
it's kind of like hurtful, actually, to see people who are thriving, and sectors that are enduring, but it's just like such a very narrow.
Well, that's funny, because like that's totally us. So like you're talking about us, because if we were to put a Zoom conversation from our company on LinkedIn, it would be that undiverse company, which is totally embarrassing, and I hate it.
That hurts, Yeah. Honest to God, it hurts to see that.
Yeah, and I don't want to be that company. So my question is, should I mean, I can use my company as an example, because we are that company. Should we make a commitment to have our next hire be someone from a diverse background?
How does that work? Yeah.
How does it work from this as a starting point for us? Because I know a lot of businesses that are in my shoes.
This is a huge starting point, and that's part of why I wanted Marvin to be a part of this discussion. I met Marvin a year and a half ago on a completely different project, and he was just doing part-time work, and he was with a catering group, and I could see in his posture and the way that he communicated, the way that he approached how he did his job, even though it was just a little part-time job, that he had values, and that he exuded excellence, and that he had dreams and aspirations. You can see it. It's just so apparent. And so the step is to find a bridge to people like Marvin, and to recognize their voice, and then to ask yourselves, kind of like, do you understand why I saw excellence in Marvin, and then how do you incorporate that in a way that helps where your values align, and that helps your business achieve its objectives, and that helps facilitate Marvin and his pursuits in life.
So mentoring.
Mentoring is that it's a part of it, but it is. I really have to applaud just this forum here, because it's given Marvin an opportunity to not only represent himself, but to represent people who have either a similar accent, or just people who that you recognize. And so now anyone who sees this stream will understand the validity and just how it can be advantageous to have someone with Marvin's skill set on board. And so for me, it's all about bridging the gaps, and this forum, it definitely seeks to achieve that, and I feel like it does so successfully. But this is the first step. But it comes down to values. I wouldn't necessarily say go out and have a diversity hire, because they might not necessarily align succinctly with your values. So
yeah, it's hard. It is. It's a hard place. It's a hard place to be. This is really what I've been thinking a lot about lately. And
these commitments also take lots of time as well. And you have to embody, you have to live a different culture, and with time you will see your team and kind of your staff become more and more diverse. And there is another thing that we haven't touched upon that cuts through all these things, like all issues about age, gender, sexuality, ability, ethnicity, which is class and social economic background. And it's a very, very important thing. So a gay man from, let's say, Chelsea, London, has got completely different opportunities from a gay man that was raised in a working class family up in Bolton, for instance. Mm-hmm. So and these kind of and social economic backgrounds and class, especially in this country, if you don't mind me saying, it's another barrier that cuts across all of that kind of all of the minority groupings.
Mm.
Alia, can I just ask you? Oh, sorry, were you going to speak? You go ahead. I was going to ask you a question, but I can ask you next. No?
Oh, bless you. Thank you, Polly. I was just going to, I guess, give Donna some confidence here in terms of running a business and feeling nervous about the fact that perhaps there isn't that diversity in your organization. Because a lot of people are facing this. And I think one of the big things that we're advising our clients who run small businesses is to take some positive action. Not positive discrimination, because that's illegal, positive action. So make a stance, recognize the uncomfortable truth that it is, and think about how you are going to change it. So what we've seen in small businesses, actually, it's not just a leadership thing. We're seeing employees at all levels wanting to engage in this debate and feeling strongly about it. Not everybody, but there is definitely, we've seen a bit of a groundswell of this is actually really important. Why are we in this situation, and what can we do to change it? So it is about where you are looking to hire your people? Is it about thinking about what your current diversity makeup is and what's missing? Is it about thinking about, as Kevin said, mentoring is a great opportunity to start developing conversations with talent? Is it about just keeping the door open and just meeting people and having conversations with people that you perhaps wouldn't have previously, just to keep that open? Is it about changing the way you hire? Is it about those blind CVs that we talked about, removing the bias? So I run a small business too. I'm the only ethnic diversity person in the business, and I run that business. So, there's a shame on me in all of this too. I'm kind of like, well, why? Yeah. Why right now don't I have a different population in my organization? So we've done a diversity survey. We've encouraged the team to talk about it. I've pulled together there's so much resource on the web around unconscious bias. I think a lot of people feel like, oh my God, diversity and inclusion means you've got to spend a lot of money, there's got to be a lot of budget, we've got to change everything, and we've got to do it really quickly. Yana said, it's a slow burn, but we need positive intention. We need to recognize there are going to be hurdles. We need to recognize that actually it's quite risky putting yourself out there and doing this and saying, actually, we haven't got this right. It takes courage. It takes commitment as well. We've seen lots of businesses that there was an open letter in a trade publication called Campaign for the advertising industry, where I think about 500 leaders in the advertising industry signed this pledge to say, we commit to change. A lot of people felt bandwagon, jumping on it. How truly connected are they to this? Yeah. I think in all of this, if you can come with positive intent, if Marvin can come to an interview and feel like he's getting an excellent positive experience, he's learning about a business, they're learning about him, he comes out of that interview experience, gets good feedback, not just bleh feedback, really good feedback. We thought these were your strengths, this is where you shone, these are the things we still need to find out about. If that process happens, then I think that's a really good start. Yeah. And I think, we all have websites. We should all have something on there. If we really want to say that we're doing something and we're committed to equal opportunities, let's put it out there. Let's be proud of it. Yeah. And let's hold ourselves
that's a good point,
to the fire to do it.
I think
that's what I was going to ask. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
I think on top of that is, as a content creator, my business is stories, Yeah. And so if you have contrasting worlds of perspectives, and even if it's just a sit down interview between, Marvin and, a cis, white man, from, who cares, London or whatever. And, and it's some piece of content, and it's some piece of content that gives perspective into what is true from Marvin's perspective, and from this man's perspective. And you can, especially if it's a company where you're showing interactions between people from different worlds, essentially, then you humanize Marvin in another degree. And so not only for your company, but for the people who follow your company, who follow your content, then it's more relative, it's more normal for someone like Marvin, and you'll understand what he has to offer, or what his aspirations are in a different way that will, start to break down some of those barriers. And so, I really think that if you're truly committed to having a diverse and inclusive environment, it starts with communicating. It starts with learning to speak one another's language. And when you can have content that reflects that effort and that humanization, then you've gone a lot. You've made a huge step towards normalizing the presence of people who otherwise, you might be slightly honest because you don't quite understand them. It's normal to feel that way, but when you become familiar, then that starts to fade away, and you see the human element in people. So I think commitment to content, a commitment towards having content from contrasting environments is a big key.
And transparency around that as well. So why we're committed, why we're putting this here, what we don't understand about perhaps we're putting out, and how we could possibly change that, help that, adapt that. Is that, is it good to just put it out there on your website, have a separate piece of advice on there or a statement or something with your commitment? Do you think that says anything?
I don't know that I think it's probably better if it weren't separate, if it was just, this is just what we believe in. This isn't like what we think that will give us a gold star or recognized for being progressive. That our values are such that we have a commitment, and we are we're not discriminatory in terms of whose stories we think are worth telling, and the people who we are worth connecting with, and lead from the front. It can be a part of a campaign. But I think if it's what you really believe in, then it's it's not, it doesn't need to be some special annotation. It is what it is.
Just woven into the framework of what you do.
Yeah.
Sorry, Polly. So just to touch on something that Kevin said as well. I feel like something that is undermined a lot of the times is experiential knowledge as well, because you notice that, and this is something that going through the educational system, you're always told, that degrees and enough grades aren't enough. You need work experience. You need experiential knowledge that kind of sets you apart from the rest. But then you find that, still there is this kind of discrimination towards those people that may have that experiential knowledge and may have cultures and values that have experienced things that other cultures haven't, and it's still kind of looked down upon. So I feel like there needs to really be a strong emphasis on the ability to apply the knowledge that you've accumulated over the years through different things you may have gone through, and to be able to really apply that within the workplace realm. And I think that in itself is is a skill in itself, to be able to do that. So
that's a really interesting point, actually, Marvin. As an employer, the first thing you look at is somebody's CV, and it says work experience, and you read this thing, and if it's not kind of formal work experience, you don't normally consider that. But that's a really good point to maybe, a practical and actionable thing that employers can do is to actually ask about experience rather than formal work experience. Giannis was talking about economic background and how that's also a barrier. I read somebody's LinkedIn post the other day about how she graduated uni, but couldn't afford to live in the areas where work experience was offered. So she couldn't get this work experience. So she, even though she was just as educated, probably just as, well positioned for a job, she wasn't getting these jobs because she didn't do that work experience. So I think that's a really good point, Marvin, for us as employers to talk more than just read a CV and learn about your experiences rather than just, have it be this formal thing. Yeah. I don't know where you're going. We probably should kind of cut this so we don't, we don't want to keep you guys too long. I know we could talk all day.
Interesting.
But I don't know where you wanted to end it, Polly. I did want to just ask again, if everyone could just give maybe one or two actionable pieces of advice for small business owners, what you think that they could do starting today, whether it's a tiny little step or something big to put into place. And Marvin as well, from an employee, from that perspective, what can small business owners do to kind of take steps forward.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was.
Oh, good. Giannis,
So should I start?
Oh, yeah, sure, Marvin. Go for it.
You go for it, Marvin.
Could I go last? Is that okay?
Yeah. Have a little think.
Alia, you.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, so from my perspective, small businesses should be brave. I think an actionable thing is to start educating ourselves around bias, educating ourselves around discrimination and what it is like, and how people feel around it. I think we should start talking to each other, talking within our organizations about this, about diversity and inclusion, and understanding people's perspectives, and garner interest as a collective around what we should do as organizations going forward. So I think it is showing leadership intent to educate and understand more, appreciate the fact that there are biases, but we need to understand where they're coming from and be more aware of them. And then the next step, bringing people together to start putting forward actions together. So it isn't just a leadership thing. It needs to be something that the whole organization is part of, because you can hire brilliant, diverse talent, but if your culture isn't an inclusive one, you're going nowhere.
Brilliant, thank you. Kevin?
Well, first, I think that there is a responsibility for minorities that to facilitate an environment or a discourse that is, like, in a sense, welcoming, or that allows people that makes them approachable, essentially. And so, the same way that Donna, felt like that, she could approach me to be a part of this forum, and now I could point, Donna or lots of businesses in a number of directions where they could have conversations with people like Marvin, who would help them to be more diverse and inclusive. And so if you have relationships, or if there are people who you in some ways either admire their perspective or their values, then you have to have a relationship with intermediaries. You have to have relationships with diverse people who know diverse people. And so I think that it's really important to see the validity and the the potential excellence and perspective or understanding that people of color have. And so, like yesterday, I was on this in a workshop, and there was this gentleman, Q, something from Houston. Anyways, a black guy, and he was brilliant, and but subtly so. And there were a lot of cool people on this panel, but this guy really stood out. And so I connected with him on LinkedIn, and I wonder how many people also recognize the brilliance and excellence in this guy, and how many people use him as a conduit to other, diverse talent.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really a huge part is finding people who can be that prism, or kind of channel you or focus you in the direction of people who have similar values but from diverse backgrounds. And it's all relationships. And then also the thing about blogging or just creating content and kind of doing introspection into diverse people, and then cataloging that, and then having a record of kind of breaking down those barriers or making those connections for people from different communities. So those are two things that I think would be a huge benefit.
Thank you. Giannis?
I believe that small businesses should use this kind of post-pandemic kind of opportunity as a new beginning, as a kind of fresh start, in order to explore all these concepts and the ideas we have been discussing, and in order for them to feel like their workforce represent the diversity of the communities and the clientele that they want to serve. They should, as we mentioned, they should kind of fully explore the flexible and remote working, part-time working for people, advertise for vacancies more widely, review the recruitment policies and procedures in order to remove those barriers that might kind of be there, that and enable them to reach a much more diverse team and workforce.
Yeah, thank you. Marvin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think from an employer perspective, you guys are all spot on. So I won't do too much on that note. But for employees, I'd say one thing, as I did mention previously, is definitely just placing importance on experiential knowledge and really seeing that as value beyond just the qualifications and the degree. But really placing an emphasis on the ability for people to apply their knowledge that they've accumulated and to really apply it into the workplace that can provide value, whether it be through the branding or just through the culture of the workplace as a whole. And definitely, I'd also say placing people in a position of the workplace to inform, educate, and to make decisions, to make decisions that can, improve the company and can again educate people and just creating a culture, creating an organizational culture that encourages growth. And that's on all realms, regardless of where you're from, just giving an equal opportunity, for people to become the individuals that they want to become, whether it be within that organization or going forward. Those are the tips I would give, for anyone listening.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Polly, what about you? You've been asking all the questions.
Put me on the spot. I'm involved in all of this. I've been thinking about this so widely. I've been speaking to lots of people that I know, and I've been thinking about my own position in it all and how I feel. Now, I'm always pretty good second in command. I haven't got my own business. Donna will hopefully vouch for me. My experiences have come more from being discriminated against for the ages of my children, working from home, things like that. I'm a white, straight woman. I haven't experienced any racial discrimination or, I've had a few tricky situations with men, but we won't go into that now. I just think I want to look introspectively. I would like us to inform our content more. I'd like us to write more about this. I'd like us to do a reflective post on this discussion that's ticking over in my head now. I just want to take it all on board and just be a bit more honest and a bit more transparent and have way more conversations.
Yeah.
That's what I want, with people who I've worked with before, with people who I want to work with in the future, in order to find work, in order to find more work. I just want to be more open and say it how it is, which weirdly I've never really had a problem with. But I think I've felt awkward. I think I've felt like the lack of knowledge that I have might come across and might I offend. But just having had this conversation this past hour has already made me less afraid of that.
Yeah,
so that's what
I agree. And I was just thinking that as well. I hope that if this goes out there and anybody sees it, I hope that it does exactly that and just helps them to just talk about it and not be worried about what they're going to say and just
just rip it off.
Yeah,
just
rip off the plaster. And as an employer, I think one of the main things I've taken away is that we have talked about this over the years many times. It's something that we always talk about. But I think what I think other employers should do is actually have a dedicated conversation about it. So we've kind of talked about it in passing or, in other conversations, but we've never, ever, I've had a business for 12 years or something, never have had a dedicated kind of company-wide or even leadership conversation just about diversity, which I think would be an amazing place to start in a small business, rather than just it being kind of in passing, like, oh yeah, we should do that, or yeah, that'd be nice, or have it as part of kind of day-to-day stuff, have dedicate some time to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I really enjoyed
thanks,
that.
Everybody. Yeah, it was really nice to talk to everybody. Thanks for your time.
It's lovely to meet everyone.
Yeah. We can all pester each other. Thank you again. That was ace. I really enjoyed it. And we'll have a little chat maybe about a follow-up. Maybe it would be interesting to have a follow-up in a few months' time and see where Marvin's at, see if anyone's spoken to you, see what we think has changed, if it's changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds good.
And if anybody is watching this and has any extra points, please do let us know, because I'm sure this, there's...
Send ideas for what we can write about and talk about as well, don't you think, Donna? Let's all just...
Oh, definitely. Yeah, let's all just have this big, happy conversation. Well, thanks, everybody, for your time.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet everyone.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.